Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting / open discussions. Today is June 15th, 2021. Please enter your name into the HackMD there, name and affiliation. We got some status updates and then some interesting discussion topics. And I see you added these contributor shoutouts already, Bridget?
Yes, I did.
Fantastic. I actually got the Velero shoutouts app working, so that was super neat.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I went ahead and ran this just because I think we missed a few from like previous weeks. So I did modify some of the code and stuff just to try and pick up on those. So
perfect. Thank you. All right. So yeah, if you have any discussion topics or any status updates that anyone wants to talk about, please add them in. But right now, let's start with Bridget.
Okay, hi everyone. So I think like the main thing that I've been working on this week is getting things ready to do a Velero 1.6.1 release, so a patch release to the latest Velero release. So thanks to Ali Patel last week for helping to diagnose and fix an issue that we've discovered when backing up on Kubernetes clusters. So the contribution that he made is in the contributor shoutouts, but there's another bug, another part of that will need some fixes in order to make backing up on Kubernetes 1.21 with RESTIC work correctly. So we want to get a release out for that as soon as possible. And then there are a few other fixes that will go in there, including one from Scott as well. So other than that, I've been helping to onboard the new team members that we introduced last week. And then also the design doc for the plugin versioning has gone up. I just saw before the meeting that Scott has added some comments, so thank you very much for that. And Vong had already left some comments as well last week, so thank you both. I'll try and get, I think I've addressed Vong's comments, but I will also address Scott's later today.
And I just wanted to clarify, make sure I understood the follow-on work needed. I know they had the fix so that a backup on 1.21 will then restore properly. Yes. And I think the issue is that previously existing backups without that fix will now fail and restore still, even with that fix, because that fix is only on the backup side. We also want the similar fix on the restore side.
That is correct. Yes. So I think I need to do a little bit more investigation, but I think what we can do is at the point when we're restoring, we can check what the volume source is as well and do an equivalent fix. Obviously, it's not ideal to have to add that in, but I think we need to put something in there so that backups which have already been taken aren't broken.
Yeah.
Or can be restored from.
Yeah, so that's a pretty big issue for sure. So would that be kind of an on-the-fly fix then? When you restore from an existing backup that's fairly broken, so that would be kind of on-the-fly fixing that backup. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's so if you've already taken some backups which are broken, the fix that we need to introduce would help solve that. So,
and also I think it's worth pointing out too. I think this bug pre-exists Kubernetes 1.21. We've had the notion of of these kinds of volumes before. It's just that 1.21 uses them more frequently for kind of common things. And another point here is that good that we have the end-to-end test. It was the end-to-end test that first exposed this bug for us.
Mm-hmm.
And agreed also that it was run, I guess, manually, the end-to-end test, and it only shows, of course, how valuable it is to have our end-to-end test running in CI, which is certainly a goal, especially with the new team members. They might focus on that early on.
Yes,
that's agreed. Correct. Thank you for everyone who wrote the end-to-end test, and yay that they caught this bug.
Awesome. When are we looking at releasing 1.6.1?
As soon as possible. So hopefully, so there is like there was a PR created by Scott, which is still awaiting one more reviewer, but I'll ping Dave and try and get him to review that and get that in as well, because that was a regression with CRD restores. So that's something that also needs to go into this release, but then we also need to get the PR up for that issue that I've listed as well. But hopefully we can try and get something out this week.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we definitely want to send that out as a message to the distribution list and Twitter and Slack and everything, so people know that they need to update.
Yeah. So I did. So I posted in the Velero users channel about the issue that had been discovered with a workaround as well. But yes, we'll notify everyone once the patch release is ready.
Do you want to send out a quick note to the distribution list as well?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Just so people are aware, and that a fix is upcoming very, very soon.
Cool. I will do that after this meeting.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions, comments for Bridget? Okay. So quick update from me. So I sent out a poll for the new community meeting time zone time for the Asia Pacific time zones. So I opened up a poll. You can see the poll here, and yeah, we have a unanimous vote here for 8 to 10 Beijing time in the morning there. So that will be in the evening here on Tuesday. Early morning Beijing Wednesday. So we'll send that out. We'll set up a new community meeting rotation. So I'll send out invites to everyone, and yeah, updates to all the calendar invites here. We're also doing an update to the Velero office hours. It was scheduled for 2 hours before, so we're shortening that to 1 hour based on the engagement we've gotten from the office hours. We love having the office hours. It's super fun, but we see that we very rarely go longer than 1 hour. So we're going to shorten it to 1 hour, and we hope that works for everyone. Any questions on the community meeting for the Asia Pacific time zones? All right, thank you everyone for voting. Really, really appreciate it. All right, discussion topics.
Okay, so I'm going to lead these discussions on behalf of Dave. So the first one was making a change in Velero to use a VMware-owned registry for hosting the Velero images. So, so rather than using or relying on Docker Hub for our image distribution, we would instead use images which we're also pushing to projects.registry.vmware.com and using that by default. So I think we just wanted to get like a sense of would that cause any issues for anyone? I think like our aim with this would still be that all image pushing and building and so on would be triggered from GitHub. So there's nothing that would be triggered from like within like VMware infrastructure. It would also like take place out on GitHub, but then push to that registry and use that registry by default.
So the projects.registry.vmware.com is an open harbor instance. So we're using.
Sorry, I should have added that.
Yeah, so we used a Project Harbor CNCF project, of course. I think you all know Harbor, yeah, we use this for a lot of our other open source projects as well. And I know that Antria, which is now a CNCF project, also uses it because we're seeing more and more projects moving away from Docker Hub. People are, companies are, and organizations are hitting limits within their polls and everything. So yeah, it's just an option here. Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, we ran into the same thing with our upstream stuff with Docker Hub, limits. We're trying to avoid using it even for kind of base images now, but for that reason, I know for our conveyor work, again, everything's triggered by GitHub, and we're actually using Quay.io for our repo hosting there. So it's the same idea, infrastructure we control, but it's triggered by all the GitHub open source stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
Yeah, so the builds would essentially just move from, I mean, we would utilize the same functionality that we do right now, Bridget, right? So
Yes.
everything still the same, we would just push over to a different registry.
Yes, yeah, and then the Velero binaries by default, whenever they generate the deployment manifest that they use, it would obviously be using that registry by default.
Yeah, and I guess we need to change any places in the code that make that assumptions, like in tests, for example, pull from Docker.io right now. You know, that would be changed to point to this location.
Yes, yeah, there are a few other places. For example, when doing RESTIC restores, the pods get the RESTIC restore helper.
Yep.
So there are definitely a few images that and places that need to be updated, but that would all be kind of incorporated as part of this work.
Got a question in the chat here. Would other maintainers have access to kick off this process?
So at the minute, like, so for example, like like myself as a maintainer, like I don't have credentials to our Docker Hub instance. So all of our image building at the moment is triggered by tags being pushed to the repo. So I anticipate that the same workflow would still be used. So if you are a maintainer with access to do the release process, such as pushing tags to GitHub, that's the kind of the entry point into that workflow. So we would still want to have that same kind of level of access. But like for myself, I can't directly push to Docker Hub or anything the same way I can't like directly push to, I wouldn't be able to directly push to this repo as well.
Okay, yeah, so anyone, any maintainer essentially would have the same access then. Mm-hmm. Follow up here, who's responsible for fixing it if things go wrong?
Well, it depends. I think it would depend maybe on the things that have gone wrong. These are good questions. I guess maybe like we haven't, I guess it was probably at this stage it's going to be easier for someone within VMware to be able to have the access in order to fix those. So I'm not quite sure yet what the full process would look like. Was there like something specific that you were thinking of in terms of something going wrong?
No, not really like specifically. It was more like, you know, if a maintainer outside of VMware does do the release process and something goes wrong, who is then responsible for fixing that if the maintainer does not have access to, you know, the underlying bits to make those builds happen or whatnot? Yeah, like that was more what I was getting at, was just making sure that there was at least, you know, somebody who was ready to take on that work if something happened or whatnot.
Yeah, so I think like our releases at the moment have been fairly, like for better or for worse, like our release process is quite involved at the minute. So I think that typically we tend to have somebody on standby to help resolve these issues at the minute. And I think if we were introducing new maintainers and taking them through the release process, because at the moment it tends to be folks who are at VMware who are doing those releases. But if we wanted to have like our other maintainers getting involved in that process, and obviously we would go through that with them, make sure that like they're able to run that. I think you raise a great point about if things do go wrong, because it will happen eventually, I'm sure, and we need to make sure that we have processes in place in order to handle that. So maybe that is just like having someone with access available during the release process in order to correct those issues.
That is currently also the process, right? So if something would happen right now on Docker Hub, we would still need someone with correct credentials and access to it to fix things if things went wrong.
Yes, that is correct. Okay, were there any other like comments or questions like on this topic?
For this change, since it changes the how people update their environments and things? Do we need to have a design document for this?
Yeah, I imagine we'll go through the design process with this before we make any changes. I think Dave's main reasoning behind like raising this at this stage was that before we start to go down the path of creating the design and moving towards these changes, is just trying to make sure we capture any concerns or any blockers that would prevent this from taking place.
Sounds good. I mentioned Antria, who made this switch late last year. So they switched over to have all their public images to be on the projects.registry.vmware.com. They still had a few images on Docker Hub for their CI process, which was just being used there. They're slowly moving those over as well, but if we have certain images on Docker Hub for that purpose, I think they don't need to be moved over maybe immediately. But yeah, just wanted to.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, and I think as part of the design process, we'll hopefully go through all of that and figure out what needs to move and at what point. Yeah, we have some other like issues that are open that we would like to address soon regarding being able to specify different registries for particular images. So for example, for instance, whenever you install Velero at the moment, you can choose which image you want to use, so you can use your own registry already if that's if using Docker Hub is a blocker for you. But we also want to make it configurable so you could use a different registry, for example, for that RESIC restore helper that I mentioned at the minute. At the minute, that's still kind of hard coded, and that's something that we want to make configurable as well. So there are a few image related tasks that we might end up just kind of bundling together as part of this work.
So would that mean that we could have the VMware registry be the default, but you can then define whatever you want? So you could use Quay or any other registry as well?
Yeah, so at the minute, whenever you do a Velero install, you can override the image that is being used, but we just want to make all the other images that Velero ends up using configurable as well. So that's when you could customize your installation and instruct Velero to use a particular image in a particular registry.
Oh. Nice.
Okay. Great. So I will I'll write up some notes here and let Dave know, and then we'll think about next steps in creating a design doc for this and opening it up for more comments. Awesome.
That's great.
Okay, so the next discussion topic was something that came up during the office hours last week from LA regarding reusing particular parts of the Velero code base in other projects. And so we want to think about being very explicit about certain areas of the code base and grouping it into like a toolkit that other projects could use, which would put like a stricter kind of perhaps like a stricter like API maintenance in there, so that like we're not changing things too much, so that they're not impacting other projects which are importing this. I don't have a link to the particular section that that was being used. Let me find it. Scott, I don't know if this was something that LA had mentioned to you about reusing a particular section, a particular function within Velero in another project.
Yeah, I know kind of in general, we're kind of talking about in the discovery side. So in terms of, looking at the resources that are in a particular namespace or whatever that we'd want to, back up, and kind of using the discovery part separate from actually running a Velero backup. That's kind of the kind of high level kind of idea we were talking about, kind of the area of the code. Who's interested in using?
Yes, I think, yeah, and remember now, yes, you mentioned discovery. Yeah. It was the discovery helper.
Yeah, exactly. and I guess the one thing, I mean, even as it exists now, although it's not, published as an API and it's not stable or any of that, I know some of the prototyping we were doing, he was able to make use of that. The one area that, he was running into issues with was around, I think, the feature flags, because that, wouldn't be available because it's not a Velero install, that it was being called from. And I think he had some ideas for kind of some minor refactoring around making that easier, but that's kind of a separate question from the kind of more conceptual level of making this an API that's published and stable and all that.
Yeah, so I think Dave had maybe some comments on the proposed refactoring, just because due to the way that like we're handling some of the feature flags at the minute. But I think that's kind of like the direction that we maybe want to go to, is that if there are sections of the Velero code base which we anticipate other folks might be able to make use of, that we should try and create something a bit more robust, rather than like making explicit that like this is section, like these are packages that we've designed for consumption by other projects.
Right. Because right now there's no guarantee that, Velero 1.7 won't totally change those things because they're not APIs and all that.
Exactly. So I have to say, like, I'm not really sure if there was anything, if there was something else that Dave was looking for in this discussion. But yeah, maybe this is something as well that like we'll start to put a design for, because that just makes it a bit more explicit in terms of getting feedback on it.
Yeah, I imagine there might be kind of two levels here. There's the high level of, what is the approach to identifying a section of the code that we want to be kind of, callable as a library, and kind of how that process should work. And then there are the specifics of, okay, for this specific, discovery helper function call, this is something that I want to be able to call. Let's codify, what that looks like, and make that, something that's defined. And that we agree to kind of keep stable. Kind of the two levels there. That may be kind of the way to go there, is because right now there's not even a process around even doing this, because this is kind of the first example I think that we've had where we wanted to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think like there, I know like when I joined the project, there was something that Carlisi had been bringing up. It's like a recurring reminder to the community about like the public APIs within the project. But I know that like that particular discovery package is not one of them. So I think if that is of use, then yes, this is where we should start to, yeah, like you say, like trying to define a process around consuming parts of the Velero code base and other projects. So I'll just I'm just going to put a link to that particular issue. It is a pinned issue on the repo as well for other folks to find again more easily.
All right. Any other comments on that one? I guess we'll discuss that more.
Yes, sounds good.
Does anyone have any other discussion topics that they want to add to today's meeting? All right, then let's dive into some contributor shoutouts. Bridget, do you want to do these?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So thanks for opening up the pages, Jonas. Yeah. So the first one is the fix that I mentioned earlier from Ali, which is to skip backing up projected volumes when using Rastic. So this was a so Scott mentioned earlier, this is a change in Kubernetes 121 to use projected volumes more frequently, and this also, in turn, when restoring these types of volumes, triggers a long-standing bug in Rastic. So with this change, if you're using Rastic and backing up all volumes by default, we will skip anything that has a projected source. So this is the fix that's going to make it into 161. So thank you, LA. Okay, so this was a docs improvement from Abby sorry, I'm trying to remember this. To update the Minio docs to use the correct AWS plugin version. I think previously it was all of our docs were referencing an old and incompatible version of the AWS plugin. So all the Velero version docs have been updated so that the correct AWS plugin version is being referenced in the appropriate version of the docs. So thanks, Abby. And this is another fix from Abby for improving the docs around enabling the API group versions feature. So yeah, thank you very much for that. That's this one from Norwin Schneider. This was an issue that was in one of the Helm charts where the closing tag in the conditional was in the wrong place, and that was affecting how volumes were being mounted. So it was causing an incorrect volume mount. So that was a fix in the Helm chart. Thank you. And then the last one is from Marco for allowing more configuration on setting security contexts within the Velero pod in the Helm chart. So there are certain security context settings which need to be set at the container level. So he refactored the Helm chart and how we set the security context there to allow pod level security context, but also container level security context as well. So that was a great change. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all who contributes to the Velero project. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for the discussions today. Have a fantastic rest of the week and see you all next week.
See
Bye,
you then,
folks.
everyone. Bye.